when her daughter did not return home from school. 4 days later, Kim's boyfriend contacted detectives and said that Kim had called him that morning when she went missing, asking him to pick her up at the Dairy Queen, which is located directly across the street from Western High School. Kim's boyfriend went to the Dairy Queen at around 10:45 that morning, and Kim was nowhere to be found. We were able to corroborate the boyfriend's statements after interviewing her classmates. As a result of all those interviews, we were able to determine that she had last been seen at around 10 o'clock that morning at Dairy Queen. On January 31st of 1979, detectives received a phone call from a citizen who had located Kim's school bag containing her purse, gym clothes, and school books. And they were on a travel lane on Decatur near Charleston. For 3 weeks, detectives investigated Kim's disappearance. However, we were unable to gather any leads. On February 20th, LVMPD was contacted by 3 juveniles who had located Kim Bryant's body in a desert area near Buffalo and Charleston. The LVMPD homicide section investigated this case for years without being able to identify a suspect. As a result, Kim's case was eventually classified as a cold case homicide. For the past 42 years, this case has been reviewed by numerous LVMPD detectives, hoping to gather new leads. We originally recovered DNA evidence from the suspect at the time of the murder. However, we were unable to make an identification. If you remember earlier this year, I announced that we had solved a different cold case homicide because of a generous philanthropist, Justin Wu, who donated money for the LVMPD for genealogical testing on cold case homicides. After we solved that case, Justin provided additional money to help us solve even more cases. As a result of the additional funding, we sent Kim's case to Othram Labs in Texas for additional DNA genetic work. 10 days ago, we were notified that the genealogical profile built by Othram Labs, based on sperm recovered from the body of Kim Bryant at autopsy, revealed that Johnny Blake Peterson was the person who kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and murdered Kim Bryant. I'm now going to read a statement from Edward Elliott, who is Kim's father. On behalf of my family, I would like to thank the LVMPD and investigator Terry Miller and all the investigators who have worked on this case over the past 42 years. I would also like to thank Justin Wu for putting up the money, which helped make today's announcement possible. Kim was a beautiful girl with a bright future, and it makes me happy that something is being done to help solve cases such as hers. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Justin Wu for a couple comments.
First off, condolences to Kim's family. We hope that we provided a little bit of closure for you. It's been an honor to work with the Las Vegas Metro PD and Othram Labs in helping the community solve some of these cold cases. I'm proud to announce that we have a new initiative called the Vegas Justice League that will be launching. It's community leaders within Las Vegas who are banding together to help the Metro on some future cases. So we have a lot of cases lined up, and we hopefully will have a lot of solves for the LV Metro PD in the future. So looking forward to working with you guys on that, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to briefly speak about the suspect in this case. We have conducted an extensive investigation into Johnny Blake Peterson's background and learned that he resided in Las Vegas at the time of Kim's death, and at one point he attended Western High School. In April of 1980, Peterson was arrested for a sexual assault that occurred in the Las Vegas area, but that case was dismissed. Johnny Blake Peterson died on January 20th of 1993. Therefore, there will be no arrests made on this murder. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department and the LVMPD Homicide Section want to express their sincere gratitude to both Justin Wu and Othram Labs for their generous financial donations and efforts in helping us solve these cold case homicides. We continue to work diligently on all cold case homicides in an effort to provide closure and resolution, not just to the victims' families, but the entire Las Vegas community as a whole. So again, thank you both. We are not here without the donation and the kindness and the hard work of the labs and Mr. Wu and all the investigators and forensic scientists that have worked with us throughout the years to bring closure to the Bryant family. So with that, I'll take a couple questions if you have them.
Ray, this one is for Justin and yourself. Talk a little bit about, 32 years later, the importance of continuing to pursue cases like this in the Las Vegas Valley.
It's one of the things I'm most proud about with our section. When you deal with some of the most horrific crimes that this valley sees, nothing frustrates me more than when we're not able to solve a case. You've heard me mention it multiple times, we have the highest solvability rate of any major city law enforcement, but besides that, there's still cases that we can't solve. So when you're able to look back 42 years and bring some closure to a family, nothing's gonna make the pain go away, but at least the family has some closure. And I want the community to know that we never stop working these cases and never stop following up on every lead. And that's what makes this announcement today so important, because as soon as I walk away from this podium today and our detectives walk back to our office, we're back to working on the next solve that we can make. Justin, did you have a?
No, thank you for next cover.
Okay. Yes.
Which school did the victim go to and the suspect go to, and do you believe that he knew her from that interaction? Or?
So we know at one point the suspect did go to Western High School. She was a student at Western High School. We're looking to see if there was any interaction. At the time of her death, he was not a student at that school. However, we can't rule out if there was any type of interaction previously. We are looking into it.
I know you put out a statement from the victim's father. Did you inform him that you'd made an arrest, or could you describe that moment when your people called him and let him know?
So, I always let the lead detectives make those notifications, because these detectives work tirelessly, and that's the reason they're here doing this job, and they, that's the satisfaction that they get. So I can tell you, when the lead detective did reach out to the family, there's closure, but again, it doesn't bring their daughter back. And, it's the hardest part of this assignment is when you deal with the families. We do everything we can to solve the cases, but again, you're dealing with families that have been devastated, and I can't imagine the pain and the loss that they've gone through. In the back.
Was he, what age was the suspect at the time of this?
So she was 16, he was 19.
He was a suspect at one point, you collected DNA. What happened there?
So just to clarify, he was never on the radar as a suspect. We had for this murder. So we had DNA that we had recovered that was showing there was no match for the DNA. So in that regards, we were unable to link the two. So, yes.
This is streaming, so for those of people who don't understand, hey, why wasn't this done years ago? This DNA sent years ago. Can you maybe explain why this was able to happen now with the help of the donation?
So I do want to speak real briefly. Michael Vogan, he is with Othram Labs. He made the trip here to Las Vegas on behalf of the lab, and he's going to answer a little bit of the scientific questions where he can answer that for you real quick as far as.
Hello, my name is Michael Vogan. I'm the Director of Case Management at Othram. We built Othram just a couple of years ago from the ground up to be a completely full-service end-to-end forensic lab that works exclusively with folks like the Las Vegas Metro PD to identify perpetrators of crime and also Jane, John, and baby does. So because we have this end-to-end process, we access tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of markers of DNA, which when you build that profile enables you to upload those into various databases where you can find distant relatives and include or exclude out as being related to your source. And I know, Kim, you may have something to add to that.
Yes, my name is Kim Murga. I'm the Director of Laboratory Services for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Just to kind of tag on to what was just said, the LVMPD brought on DNA in June of 1999. We then obtained CODIS in April of 2001. But DNA continues to evolve in becoming more and more sensitive. So we first attempted DNA on this particular case back in 2008. We were not able to get a DNA profile. Technology has continued to advance and revolutionize. We again attempted DNA on different items of evidence in January of this year. We were able to obtain a foreign male DNA profile on some evidence, and we put that DNA profile into CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, and at that time we obtained no hits. So we were aware that if we obtain no hits from a 1979 cold case homicide, we're probably not going to get any hits, and that's why we thought it would be a wonderful case to turn over to have advanced genetic genealogy testing performed on.
Yes.
Do we have any indication how many samples similar to this there are still out there that could be run and lead to more arrests?
So the best cases for genetic genealogy are cases that have reached a DNA dead end, meaning that we have a DNA profile we believe to be from a suspect, but we've put them into the Combined DNA Index or the CODIS database and we have no hits. We did run a query. We have about 100 plus cases that are cold case homicides in which we have developed DNA profiles, but we've have had no hits. We are working with our cold case homicide team to evaluate those cases and also for resources to get them sent out to Othram labs. We're also looking at expanding not only solving cold case homicides, but cold case sex assaults as well. So we are also working with our cold case sex assault detectives to evaluate cases that we may have a suspect DNA identified in one or multiple cases, and we're looking to start sending those out as well.
And a follow-up to that one, just real quick. It's great that Mr. Wu has come forward to provide resources for this, but what kind of resources would you need to kind of clear that cache to take care of that?
Well, it's really a case-by-case basis. So there is the cost of doing the thousands of genetic marker testing in Othram labs and other similar labs. But then there's also the genealogist component, which can be add up if they have to do extensive evaluation of different records that may be available. I don't have an exact figure, but I know through generous donations as well as working with our own department, we will continue to send out these cases as long as resources are available in the hopes of solving some of these cold cases.
If the suspect passed over 20 years ago, how did you find his DNA to make that match? Where did it come from? How did you draw that bridge?
So we have, on all homicide investigations, even when the case is still being worked and evidence was collected back in 1979, all of that evidence is still stored in our evidence vault. So just because we're not actively testing it doesn't mean we still have that evidence. So we're able to go back, pull the evidence, and look for
Where did you get his DNA from? And how did you go about his DNA? Was it from where he was charged with sexual assault years later? How did you find this guy?
So his DNA was recovered at autopsy from sperm that was recovered during autopsy. That is where the DNA link was made. Yes.
What he's asking is, how were you able to take that and link that to this suspect who died years ago? Was his DNA already in the system, or was a family member that linked it?
You want me to let you answer that?
So I can talk a bit, Kim, if you want to. So basically, when we developed the profile of this unknown suspect and we created that large profile that I mentioned had all those markers of DNA, we upload that into various databases and we find distantly related people to that DNA, and we slowly include or exclude them as being closely related, and we work that family tree until we get to a point that we then go back to the investigators and say, hey, here's some information on some people that if you got their date of birth, where their family's from, where their parents were born, and give that back to us, we can start filling holes of the puzzle. And then it's basically confirmed with Kim's lab, where we found a relative that I believe was willing to test, and they gave a sample, and then we could detect the familial relationship.
So it was through a family member of the suspect that was able to link it, right?
Correct.
If I could follow on that, what resources do you use to offer them? Are you just using criminal databases here, or are you using those genealogy kits that we
Yeah,
send out?
so it's important to point out, we do what is called forensic grade genome sequencing. That's the process name that we use. And we develop those profiles for the various databases GEDmatch, Family Tree DNA. We have our own called DNA Solves. And people either opt in or opt out depending on the database that they're in to help search against law enforcement cases.
These are public databases?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Has Johnny's name come up at all in any other of these, any tests that you guys have?
So at this point, we are looking at any potential other cases that he could be involved in. Again, it's still very early on. I will tell you that there's the possibility that we are looking at, and there is that possibility. So there's a couple cases that are getting a spotlight right now that are potentially related, but still too early to link that. One last question.
Can you relate or give us any more details about the suspect? Was he living in Las Vegas his whole life, or was he from Vegas, or?
So again, he lived in Las Vegas at the time that the murder occurred. There was criminal activity that he was involved in throughout that time. Again, I mentioned the sexual assault in 1980. There's some other property type crimes and drug related offenses that he was involved in. Yes, here, prior to his death. So again, thank you everyone for coming out. We appreciate it, and have a great afternoon.